Welcome back. I'm here with Michelle Lujan, Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham. I apologize. I keep saying your first name without saying your proper.
You can. We're old friends.
Yes. Always thank you again for coming on the show. We were talking about the VA. VA, when General Shinseki came in, he came in with a lot of problems there. He had a lot of issues on his plate there.
This is not new.
This is not a new thing. And the main thing I think most people didn't want to talk about was, or on the media, was the fact that all these 2-point-something million returning from Afghan and Iraq war. This is where the problem was. It was never estimated when they were returning how we would deal with such a thing. So, you know, it was a deferred thing, like, okay, well, we'll deal with it later. So, number one, the wars were never put on the books. And then the VA administration was not ready for such a huge influx of...
They were not.
They were not ready. So mismanagement, I think, began from that point on.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Really, and they hid. They weren't very transparent about their problems. I mean, part of your role as an advocate is to say, look, we underestimated the number and the real chronic and significant healthcare issues that need to be addressed by the men and women who are coming back from both Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay. All right, so I expect that even if you don't have the tools that you need, you still are responsible and accountable to identify those problems and to look with Congress and the administration for ways to address them. Instead, what happened and does happen in these large bureaucratic institutions is they sort of circled their wagons, looked inward. They had a performance bonus system that was supposed to incentivize doing the best work. It actually incentivized these secret wait lists. I think it really harmed veterans, and it created an even more difficult culture for someone like General Shinseki or anybody moving forward to address. But I think having a new secretary is important. I think that is the kind of, you cannot change that culture unless you bring new individuals who are very clear about the problems they have inside.
So it was a lower management, I think, he had to deal with. And I think that's where the problem was.
I have to tell you, I think it's both. You know, you've got regional administrators and regional managers who have been in those jobs 20 plus years, some 30. They've known the entire time that they've got real challenges in their hospitals and their healthcare system. And I'm expecting accountability at that level too, as they begin to look who made what decisions about the waiting lists, about the lack of specialty referrals, about the fact that it takes 2 years to hire a doctor. Whoever was in charge of HR, recruiting, training, all of the intake systems, because it's not just unique to Albuquerque. Right? We've got them in El Paso, we've got them in Texas, we've got them in Phoenix, we've got them in Arizona, we've got them all around the country. That tells me that at much higher levels of management, people knew. Otherwise, you would have a more organic response. Something strange in Albuquerque, something totally different in Phoenix, something totally different in Texas, and that's not the case. You see the same negative patterns.
700,000 have already been diagnosed as disabled, returning. 2-point-some million have returned from the 2 wars. I personally don't think the system was able to handle that. And I said that when we first went into the first war, before even went to the Middle East, Iraq, I was saying the VA cannot handle this when all these folks are coming back. And this was many years ago. I was actually tweeting about this. And I said, no, this is going to be something that I think the administration, the future administration, will have to deal with. It's going to be a very touchy situation. So when General Shinseki came in, he was dealing with already a collapsing structure there.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean to defend him there, but I'm just trying to be fair to him in that sense, where he came in.
And in fact,
he walked into
he was really widely regarded and is still highly respected. And in fact, I was one of those members that called for his resignation that had more to do with, if you don't make it clear that we're going to really start fresh and be very clear about the culture, then it's too easy for us to ignore many of the problems that we've identified. It took a lot of courage and strength for Secretary Shinseki to step down and say,
well, I'm glad he stepped down. That was the right thing to do, I think.
And he didn't have to do that. Right? I don't know that the president would have required that. It took a lot of courage, and I have a lot of respect for his leadership skills given that situation. And I really appreciate that you and others recognize that this has been a long-standing problem that was certainly not created by General Shinseki.
No, well, they're dealing, because when I looked at the VA, I looked at the VA as an organization dealing with returning veterans and dealing with the previous wars, Gulf War I, and then right after that we're dealing with two here. This was a massive venture we went in, the two different wars.
Right.
And then these 2.3 million returning right now are going to cost us roughly around 600 billion to a trillion in the next 40 years.
And that's a very important point. So when you talk about the 17 billion, that's nothing.
It's a drop in the bucket.
It is, which is why we're going to have to reassess how the entire system works and how it's connected to the private healthcare system. We also have to recognize, as you said so eloquently, that we underestimated the number of individuals who would come back because we are now saving so many of our men and women on the battlefield. So they're coming back with incredible wounds and injuries, and that's before you get to invisible wounds like PTSD that are not immediately addressed. It's a chronic condition that requires a real investment in behavioral health, which is another thing that we have not adequately invested in the VA. So I do think that this 17 billion is a step in the right direction because it gets everybody in. We have a brand new baseline. It's enough to start shifting the culture in the right direction. They need to hire more docs and healthcare practitioners. And then we've got to have a much better
partnership. And they're adding from the last bill, right? They're adding another 28 facilities, I think.
Absolutely.
Something to that.
Smaller clinics, primary care clinics, urgent care clinics are really working on creating a more comprehensive healthcare system. But something that I want to have happen, I still need two more things. Without requiring legislation, because I don't need legislation, I'm still really pushing hard that the VA administration bring in an outside investigator. I've recommended that it be the Department of Justice, because even though we're getting more information out of their internal unit, their internal affairs, it's still slow in coming, and they also have known these issues all along. And I think there's a real trust problem. Certainly I do. And in fact, I often get information that's incomplete, that we can't validate without getting other sets of information. Many members of Congress are actually combing through with their staff documents independently because we're not getting the kind of stuff that looks that has enough substance that I can tell you unequivocally, I know they're on the right path. So I'm very concerned about that. And in this hospital, I'd like to see a hospital monitor. You know, we do that. The state of New Mexico can put any hospital that's got serious issues into receivership. We have an opportunity to put somebody parallel who's watching. That's how you really affect culture. And then from a legislative standpoint, I think we ought to have a private peer review who's looking at outcomes in the veteran system from the outside. We do it in the private healthcare system. Medicare requires that. We need to require that for the VA system. And that's how I think that you have a much more positive environment moving forward.
I was talking to, when I saw when Senator Rockefeller introduced that bill, he actually said there's no perfect bill. And here we are, we're trying to, bring them into the private system there. They can go to private doctors now. There's a lot of benefits there.
Right.
I see this as eventually now, when on the left, when individuals say, well, this is probably leading towards a single-payer system as far as Affordable Care Act and all that. They're trying to mesh it in. I think this is why they had caused this problem to begin with and stuff. And I think that's a separate issue completely. But I think the watchdog groups, I think you're right on that note when you said there has to be a system regulating, because such a vast body. When I looked at it, I saw so many different divisions there, from the pension to other individual bodies there that are governing the cemetery division, all the returning, the mental health division,
the healthcare system's not the only one that's struggling, right? It's the entire administration. And to defend them, you're right. They've never had the resources. We never accounted for the number of individuals and families who we promised to be there for, and now we're not. But by the same token, when you have individuals in a system who know that not referring you and you've got cancer to an oncologist means that you will not live long enough to complain, these are individuals that require accountability. And this is a system that needs significant attention and reform. And I'm going to stay through it for the long haul until we get it right.
Yeah, I'm glad you're out there fighting for it. We need that. We need a lot of representatives, I think, focused on it, because this is not something that will get fixed in the short term, even in the long term.
There's some short term, and we've done that investments, but this is a long-term problem. We can't walk away now. That's right.
Let me take a short break.
Absolutely.
And come back. Okay. Take a short break, guys. We'll be right back.